Chapter 2. Alexandria walked up the rough-hewn stairs and past the man sitting on the cut log-style bench on the Khan's front porch. She didn't know who he was, and though something about him intrigued her, the scowl on his face was enough to make her keep her distance. She didn't need to get involved with anyone else's drama. She had enough going on in her life without adding to it. At the door she knocked, doing her best to ignore the man sitting just a few feet away as she waited to be let inside. She hoped he didn't see her glance darting to him. There was just something about him that called to her. The door opened, and one of the enforcers let her in. Bobby, she thought his name was, but she wasn't sure. Inside was warm, uncomfortably so with her coat on. She shrugged it off and looked around for where to put it. "I'll take that." A boy a little younger than herself stepped forward and took the hot pink coat. "We're putting them in the bedroom." Alex didn't recognize him, but her nose told her he was part of the clan. She surrendered the jacket and looked around. This was the first time she'd ever come to the clan leader's house alone. Usually she came with her parents, but this year her dad was sick, and while he wasn't exactly bedridden, he wasn't doing very much either. She was glad it was winter, and there was a limited amount that had to be done at home. Deciding there was nothing to do but suck it up and act her age, Alex approached the Khan. "Merry Christmas, sir?" He looked at her a second. "Merry Christmas, Alexandria." He looked around. "Where's your folks?" "At home. Dad's not feeling well." "Is everything all right?" He was instantly concerned. "Yes, sir." She gave him a forced smile. "As good as can be expected. He's not a young man anymore, and his heart isn't what it once was." He lifted one side of his mouth. "It works that way sometimes. We can't avoid the ravages of time. It affects some of us more strongly than others. How's the ranch? Are you managing things all right, or do you need some help?" "I'm doing okay. It's not too bad this time of year, and I've been able to handle it on my own." "I don't want you working yourself sick. If you need some help, I don't care what kind, don't hesitate to call." He gave her a stern look. "I mean it." Alex said she would, wished him a happy new year and moved on. She knew it was his job to make sure everyone in the clan was safe and secure. Happiness he couldn't guarantee, but he was a good leader and would do what he could to help where she needed it. She had no doubt. She joined the line filing past the Khan's wife, who was also his mate. It wasn't a long line, but it moved slowly, giving Alex a chance to look around. There were several people she didn't recognize, and from the scent in the room, more than one who wasn't clan, though they were Kitsune. A woman Alex didn't know appeared from the hallway and went to sit beside the Karen, surprising Alex. She didn't speak, she didn't ask permission, she just sat down as if she belonged there. Alex wondered who she was. The line moved, until Alex stood in front of the alpha female of the pack. "Merry Christmas, madam," Alex said, keeping her eyes downcast so the Karen wouldn't feel challenged. It was a little difficult to be deferent while standing with the alpha seated, but she did her best. "Merry Christmas, Alexandria, it's good to see you. How are you doing?" "I'm good." Alex was surprised that the Karen cared enough to ask. "How's the ranch? And your parents? I don't see them here." Alex flushed. She had no idea that the clan leaders knew her name, much less knew what was going on in her life. "It's good." She told the Karen about her father's illness, and the other woman leaned in, obviously listening. "What's wrong with your dad?" the new woman asked. Rebecca turned and motioned to the woman next to her. The woman who'd just asked about her father. "Have you met our Shaku's new mate?" "No." Alex looked at the woman with a new understanding. The Shaku was the head of clan security and lived here close to the Khan and Karen, so they would naturally be friends, or Alex at least hoped living that close they would be friends. It would suck to have to live so close and interact so often with someone you didn't get along with. This is JV, she's been here for a couple months now. She and the Shaku have just announced their engagement. It's nice to meet you. Alex offered her hand to the new woman. It's nice to meet you too, Alexandria, is it? It is, but I go by Alex. Alex. I like that. It's nice to meet you. She smiled and seemed genuine. Come over here and talk to me a moment. She looked at Rebecca for a second, and when the Karen nodded, JV stood and led Alex to a somewhat empty corner of the room. Tell me more about your dad, what's wrong with him? Alex explained about her father's heart condition, that he seemed to have the flu, and she was worried about him. And there's been no clan healer to help him. JV concluded. Alex shrugged. No healer, but I'm not sure if one would be able to help, he's not exactly one of us. JV frowned. Oh, you mean he's a normal human? She tilted her head to one side. I've never tried to heal a human, but if you'd like, I can come over and try. You're a healer? Alex felt her eyes go wide. I am, though I'm not very strong yet, JV shrugged. I'll take any help you can give us. I don't want to lose my dad. I'll do what I can. I assume Rebecca knows how to contact you. JV tilted her head toward the Karen. I'm sure she does, and if she doesn't, she knows how to get a hold of my folks for sure. Good. I'm sure I'll be in touch in the next day or so, and go look at your dad. I'll be waiting. She went and asked the boy who'd taken her coat for it back. While she realized she'd been nervous about coming alone, but she was glad she had. With her coat back, she left, noticing the man on the porch was gone and wishing she'd gotten to see him again. The next morning, while Alex worked on feeding the animals, her cell phone rang. Struggling to take her glove off, she was a little breathless when she answered the unknown number. Hello? Is this Alex? A voice asked over the line, one that seemed vaguely familiar. Yes. She hesitated to say more, not knowing who was on the line. My name is JV, we spoke yesterday. Oh yes. I remember you. Her heart jumped. She hoped this new member of the pack could help her father. I'm free this afternoon, if that's a good time. Steve will bring me out, and I can take a look at your dad. That would be great. She cringed when she remembered that she'd forgotten to tell her mother of the possible visit. Too late now, she'd go up and let her know as soon as she finished with the animals. Do you need directions? No, Steve says he knows the way. All right, I guess we'll see you this afternoon. We'll be there around 2 o'clock if that's okay. Perfect. It gave her only a little while to finish feeding and let her mom know, but she didn't care, she was going to get as much help for her dad as she could. I'll see you then. They rang off, and Alex hurried to finish with the horses. She'd already checked on the cattle, so once she finished in the barn, she was done until evening. Stepping out of the barn into the cold wind, Alex hunched her shoulders and rubbed her gloved hands together as she hurried to her truck. It wasn't all that far to her parents' house, but if she walked it, she'd only have to walk back later to get the truck. She hopped inside and made the short trip, then rushed through the cold wind up the front steps of the house she'd grown up in. Stomping her feet on the steps and porch to knock off any mud, she opened the door and let herself in. Mom, she called as she toed off her boots next to the door. In here, her mother's voice came from the kitchen at the back of the house. She headed back. In the kitchen, she found her mother stirring a steaming pot on the stove. Stew. Alex sat on one of the stools at the bar. Yep, and rolls. Her mother opened the oven to check the bread. Alex's stomach rumbled. Sounds like you could use some too. I'd love some, she paused, but I have to confess I didn't just come up for some hot food. What's up, dear? Jolene turned and looked at her. Well, when I went to the cons yesterday, they asked about you and Dad. I was honest and told them Dad's not doing too well. She looked up from where she'd been watching her fingers against the countertop. Did you know the pack has a new healer? No, I didn't. He must be new. She's the Shaku's mate. I didn't know he'd made it either. Not many did, apparently. Anyway, she asked me about Dad yesterday and said she'd like to try to help. That's nice, but I'm not sure how much she can do. That's what I told her, but she wants to try anyway. They'll be here about 2. Her mother looked up sharply. 2. Yeah. That's in an hour. Why didn't you say so sooner? I forgot last night, and I didn't think she'd be here so soon, but she called while I was feeding the horses and said they are coming this afternoon. They? Mother looked around the house with panic in her eyes. Who all is coming? I think just JV and the Shaku, but I'm not sure. Alex knew her mother. She was panicked because she didn't think the house was clean enough. Alex couldn't see a thing out of place except the dishes her mother was using to make lunch. Mom, they're not coming to inspect your housekeeping. I'm sure no one would care if the place was a disaster. I care. Her mother bustled around the kitchen, loading the few dishes in the sink into the dishwasher and getting them out of sight, before wiping down the already spotless counters again. Even though she was expecting them soon, Alex's heart started racing when she heard the truck pull into the yard. She slid off the stool where she'd been watching her mother panic and went to answer the door. She opened the door while JV and her mate were climbing the steps. Come on in. She held the door open for them. Can I take your coats? She was the kind of her host her mother had taught her to be. Mom would slap the shit out of her if Alex embarrassed her by not being welcoming enough, especially in her mother's house and to someone so high in the clan. She hung up their coats and hats as her mother came in. Oh my! Thank you so much for coming out to see us. It's no problem, Jolene, the Shaku said. Jade isn't sure she can help since Randy isn't a shifter like us. She's still learning how to use her talent, so there's a bit she's not sure of yet, but she wants to try. It's the least I can do, JV said with a shrug. It can't hurt to try. She smiled at the older woman, and Alex liked her even more than she had when she'd first met her the day before. I have a few questions for you before I try to help your husband. If you don't mind? JV's eyes flicked to Alex, then back to her mother. Of course, of course. Why don't we go in the living room and have a seat? They all followed Jolene into the living room. JV and her mate took their seats. Alex's mother looked at her, then flicked her eyes to their guests. Drinks, she mouthed. Alex knew what she meant. Can I get you something to drink? Alex offered. She knew her mother normally would but couldn't now because JV's questions were for her, not Alex. Coffee please, the Shaku said. Just water for me, was JV's reply. Cream. Sugar? Alex asked before getting the drinks. Just black. Mom? Can I get you anything? Jolene shook her head as she shifted in her recliner. It was angled toward the sofa where the couple sat. I'll be right back. She fetched the drinks and returned a few minutes later. Passing out drinks, she listened in on the conversation. You said you two are mated, right? Sealed? JV asked. Yes, we've been mated for more than 20 years. She was quiet for a moment. I don't know if it will matter, but it may help. I've never tried to heal a non-human, mated to one of us or not. I guess it doesn't hurt to try. Jolene wrung her hands in her lap. Does it? I can't see that it would. JV looked at Alex, then back to Jolene. Can I see him? Oh, of course. Jolene stood and smoothed her skirt. Alex watched her mother fuss with her hair as she waited for the others to get to their feet. He's upstairs, come on up. Alex followed them, curious if the woman would be able to help her dad. He's been in bed all day. Jolene wrung her hands. There's not a lot of room in the bedroom. Alex knew her mother was right. They would never all fit in there. If they did, there would never be enough room to move. No problem, the Shaku said. I'll stay down here. Her mother glanced at her, and Alex knew she would be missing what happened when someone was healed. I'll stay with you. She waited until the two women had left, and sat where her mother had been. She didn't know what to say. How long has your dad been sick? The enforcer asked from his seat on the sofa. A little over a week this time. This time? He lifted one brow. Yeah. He was sick for a few days last month. Who takes care of the place when he's laid up like this? I do. She thought the answer should be obvious. It was only the two of them running the ranch. Just you. You can't possibly do it all. I'm all there is. She shrugged. She didn't know why he found it so hard to believe. She hadn't thought about how much work it was, just that it had to be done. He blinked and watched her for several seconds. No more. He said with a frown. Excuse me, sir? First call me Steve. Second, from now on when Ralph falls sick, you're to let me or Nick know. We'll make sure you get some help. You don't need to do that. She wasn't sure why she was protesting. She would be glad to get some help. We do. It's part of taking care of the clan. He met her gaze. You don't need to be working yourself to death any more than he needs to suffer. Alex took a deep breath and let it out slowly, using it as an excuse to not say anything for a moment or two. All right. She heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to look toward the staircase to see her mother and JV coming down. How did it go? She asked once the pair reached the floor. I couldn't do much, JV shook her head. I tried but it wouldn't work. She looked disappointed. Stephen looked from his mate to Jolene, a slight crease between his brows. You said the two of you are mated, right? Yes, we have been for 27 years, why? Jolene looked at Steve, then to JV, hopeful. Steve held up one hand. I don't have a lot of experience with matings and even less with human shifter couples, so don't get your hopes up. His eyes shifted to his mate. Can you sense when he's hurt or ill? Through your bond, I mean. Jolene frowned. Well, yeah, of course. Steve looked down, then back up. JV and I can share energy back and forth to each other to speed healing or help when the other is tired. Can you do anything like that? Yes, it's limited as to how much Randy can give me, because he just doesn't have as much reserve as I do. She watched the Shaku for a moment. Does this mean something? I'm not sure yet, he said, the crease on his brow deepening. He turned to JV. I don't know if it will work, but what do you think of trying to heal her? You make sure she's in top condition, then hopefully she's better able to shift energy to him to help his body repair. Wonder crossed JV's face. I don't know if it will work, but I'm willing to try. She turned to Jolene, that is if you are. Of course. I'll try almost anything. Jolene jumped at the chance to help her mate. Let's sit back down and I'll do what I can. JV motioned to the sofa and chairs where Alex and Steve still stood. Once everyone was seated once again, JV took charge. Just sit back and relax, this shouldn't take long. Alex watched as her mother did as instructed. JV closed her eyes and they all fell silent for several minutes. Finally, after what felt like an hour but in reality had been less than 5 minutes, JV took a deep breath and let it out in a rush as she opened her eyes. Wow! She blinked several times. There was more there to be done than I thought there would be. Is she sick too? Alex's heart beat faster. Was she in danger of losing both her parents? No, she's just a little run down. JV turned back to Alex's mother. Are you feeling better? Some, yes. Jolene sat up and moved to the edge of her seat. JV rubbed one hand over her face. Steve smoothed his hand over her back once, then took her hand in his. Let me guess, JV said. You and Alex have been trying to keep everything going smoothly while your husband has been ill. She looked at Jolene. Yes, but it's the middle of winter, the workload is low. It's not that bad. Jolene did her best to explain. I'm not blaming you. JV waved one hand in the air. And I have a point, I promise. Jolene visibly relaxed, she nodded, and scooted back in her seat a little. On top of the normal workload being carried by 2 instead of 3, you're also taking care of him, nursing him. While I have no doubt you don't mind, it's still work. She headed off the argument Alex saw her mother forming, before she had a chance to get it out. Have you thought to eat more than normal since he fell ill? Jolene shook her head and looked confused. Have you had a chance to shift and run since then? No, I didn't want to leave Randy alone. If you had said something, I would have come over, Mom. I didn't want to bother you. I'm not placing blame, JV said with another wave of her hand. I was just pointing some things out so you could see them. You've taken on another person's job, so to speak, plus caring for an ill person, yet you've not added to your intake of calories to fuel the extra expenditure. It's no wonder you're tired and run down, or that you have no extra energy to shift to Randy to help him recover. Jolene blinked several times. I never even thought about it. Now I feel bad that I could have done more to help him. Don't. There's no use. You can't go back and change anything. All you can do is do better from here on out. Here's my recommendation, eat every 2 to 3 hours during the day. I'm sure you know that proteins are better than carbs for us. Jolene nodded. And I recommend you shift. You don't have to go out and run, just shifting and wandering around the house or even curling up on the bed next to your mate for a while will work. But do it every 3 to 4 days. The process of shifting kick-starts our healing. If you had shifted recently, your body would have told you. You need more fuel. I can do that. Is there anything else? I want you to let us know as soon as Randy gets sick next time, or as soon as anything else happens from now on. Steve put in. If the Khan had known Randy was ill, he would have sent someone to help right away. There's no reason the 2 of you should have to do everything around here. He shot a scowl in Alex's direction. She already knew he wasn't happy that she'd done all the ranch work on her own. She'd taken care of the animals. Her mom had dealt with stuff around the house. But the way she saw it, it was their place and their job to take care of it. She hated admitting she needed help with anything. We'll call, her mother promised. And thank you so much for coming out and helping. It means a lot. We're happy to help, JV said, standing. We'll let you get back to your day. I know you weren't planning on visitors. She tugged Stephen to his feet. Just remember to eat and call if you need something. Not only are we clan, but neighbors too. I will, I promise. Jolene stood and walked the guests to the door. Alex followed, staying quiet and standing out of the way until just before they left. Steve pinned her with a look. What time do you start in the morning? She hesitated for just a second. I usually get to the barn about 6. Good, he gave a sharp nod. I'll have someone there to help you. He said goodbye once more and followed JV to the truck. Alex watched as they pulled out of the yard, then followed her mother to the kitchen. See, I told you they wouldn't care if the house is perfect. They wanted to check on you and Dad. Her mother ignored the comment about the house and went about pulling things from the fridge and pantry. I'm glad they came, Jolene said. Even if I wasn't quite ready for them. Alex watched as the pile of food grew to nearly cover the kitchen bar. What are you making now? She couldn't figure out what took potatoes, onions, a raw roast and sandwich bread. I'm starting dinner and making myself something to eat now. You want something? Her mother said without stopping as she moved around the room. After JV's first visit to Alex's dad, she stopped by at least once a week for the next couple months. Even after Randy had recovered and was back to work. She spent time with Jolene and Randy, but it was Alex who loved her visits the most. She soon discovered that while she and JV didn't have a whole lot in common, they got along well and enjoyed each other's company. So tell me, where around here is a good place to get married? JV asked Alex one afternoon in February. They were in Alex's kitchen. JV sat in a dining room chair watching while Alex moved around the kitchen, cooking. I don't know, Alex said automatically. She continued slicing mushrooms as she thought about the question for a second. Well, it depends. What time of year? Indoor or outdoor? Late May, early June, and either works. Well, you can check with the churches if that's what you want. Or there's the gazebo, the park, or if you want to go really big, you could see about the dome. JV laughed. No. It's already going to be bigger than I want. Let's not encourage my mother with the dome. Too big already. How big you looking at? Steve says because of his position, we should expect about half the clan. Wow. Alex stopped slicing for a moment and looked at JV. She knew she was staring but couldn't help it. Plus our families. JV added. What about your friends? Alex went back to cutting the ingredients for the soup she was making. I don't have any friends, JV said with a shrug. At least I didn't used to. I'm starting to make some here though. She looked at Alex for a second. As for Steve, most of his friends are here, clan or not, except for my brother, and I'm putting him on my side because he's related to me. She grinned with an expression that Alex was learning meant she was up to something. Have you thought about the lodge in Greer? What's Greer? JV frowned. You've got to remember, I'm new here. 4 months isn't long enough to know all the little nooks or crannies you have hiding about.